Good evening and welcome back to Prime of Midlife. It's Tuesday, I've survived another day at work, and this evening we're looking to talk skimpflation, treehouses and defence budgets. So that's my plan for this evening. Hopefully by the time you actually watch this video, I will be sitting through the house with a cup of tea and some freshly baked bread. I did actually start videoing the bread, but the bread making process. But I was in a hurry and I wanted it done. So it is exactly the same recipe that I have on the channel earlier, I think back in November sometime. I said it's like the best bread ever, even the kids like it. It's the same recipe. I've thrown it together. It's taken probably just under an hour to get it in the oven. That's including the rising times and the squishing and the kneading and stuffs. So hopefully I will have bread, because when I came home tonight and I put on the wood burner because it's cold and it's wet and it's horrible and I was feeling miserable, and I sat down with a cup of tea with the flames on and was like, I want homemade bread. So that's what I decided to do. So hence like flour all over me and just a general mess. Don't care. So, today, what was I reading today? Skimpflation, which is basically a jazzy word that they've invented for cheapskates, for companies reducing the quality of stuff, for things not being as good as they used to. Now, one guy said that the way he saw it was in socks. The socks were the same price, but the socks weren't nearly as thick as they used to be. For me, it's things like if you buy a ready meal or a takeaway and it's like chicken or prawn and you don't have as many bits of meat in it, it's got more veggies in it now. Or the portion controls, you know, like your shrinkflation as well, as the chocolate bars get smaller but the price stays the same. But this skimpflation is seemingly, it's where you find it most is going to be in like hospitality, catering, things like that, where people are looking to change the ingredients to make things just cost them less to put out. Now, I get that, and I would absolutely support that in my local businesses. Where I don't support it is these multi-million-pound corporations who have given shareholders multi-million pounds of dividends and then go, oh, we can't afford to actually make what we used to make, so you'll need to have the cheaper version. Shareholders didn't get the cheaper version, did they? No, the shareholders keep raking it in, and us wee lowly people, we are still getting the rubbish. So we're not impressed with that at all. But it is going to happen, and best of all in the world, there's a few places where I would go and spend money in my local shops, especially makers, people who made stuff, and they made stuff with good ingredients. They're not going to be able to keep doing that for the same price. So as long as I can, I will try and keep supporting them, but I'm presuming there will be a point where, you know, I have to take stock of what I'm buying and take stock of what is actually necessary and what is not. You know, a few years ago, I used to treat myself to Lush bath bombs. It just had to be done. And I tried a few and I got a couple of gift boxes. Thank you, Patrick. Now I don't see it as worth the money. I just don't. I'd rather buy a bath bomb from a local maker, which is cheaper. And I know that it's going into my local community. So that's what I do. So it's little things like that that just, you know, if I can make a difference, then I will. I try, although I get a lot of butcher meat from the supermarkets, I do try every so often, normally about payday, to try and buy some butcher meat from the local butcher. They aren't overly cheap, but again, supporting the local community. So yeah, things like that. But seemingly this is a new thing, skimpflation. So watch for everything changing flavours, changing tastes as they change the way they manufacture things to try and cover the costs. And as I say, I mean, I get it, I do, but not when the shareholders' dividends aren't going down, not when they've shared multi-million pounds profits or they give the CEO a £3 million pay rise. You having a laugh? Just no. So yeah, that was my first thing of today. Then I read this thing that in somewhere last year, December last year I think it was, when Boris Johnson's saying we can't afford to give every kid free school meals, he was asking a Tory party donor to pay £150,000 for his 6-month-old child's treehouse at Chequers. And the only reason it got stopped is because the security guys said no, because it was going to be above the fence line and they couldn't protect it. Line of sight and all that sort of rubbish. £150,000 by a party donor for a 6-month-old treehouse. Are you having a laugh? And at the same time he's saying no, we can't afford to pay for kids' school meals. I mean, I don't know what is going on in this world. I don't know why this is still happening. I don't know why people are still supporting this. But oh my God. So yeah, that irked me beyond belief. And then one of the Daily Rags, we're not impressed with them either, is like the militant unions and the list of jobs that are people who are threatening to go on strike, and they're all militant unions and they're this and they're that. No, they're not. They're not militant unions at all. They're people trying to actually feed their families and pay their rent and do, see, look, I'm off on one again. You know what I mean? So yes, that was that. Just beggar's belief, as far as I'm concerned. The other thing that just recently came out, just when I was sitting having a cup of tea there, was the defence budget. Now, seemingly, in the budget, they said that for defence it was going to be something like a certain percentage above inflation. And I would presume anyone who's got an iota of sense with what's going on in Ukraine would think that increasing the defence budget is a relatively sensible idea, would you not? However, it seems that whilst our esteemed Prime Minister is saying, oh yes, we will hold it to that, it's now changed from inflation as it is just now to inflation over the longer term. So basically, as far back as he can put it, when it was at 2%, 1%, so he doesn't have to pay 2% or whatever percentage over the 9% that it is just now, or the 10% that it will be next month, or the almost 11% is supposed to be at the end of the year. So the goalposts have been changing, and when somebody asked another member of the Tory party about this, they're like, oh yes, but you know, the spendings all had to change because look at what happened with COVID. So, you know, what was said before the pandemic is now no longer valid because of all the spending changes. That was very nearly a bad word that came out there. And you're like, really? So now you've got the perfect excuse for any manifesto pledges, any budget pledges, anything that the government doesn't want to do. They will now just say, well, you know, it doesn't count anymore because the spending that we made in COVID. You lost billions on test and trace. That was not our spending. So get your donors to cover that rather than your £150,000 playhouse for your 6-month-old. Irked. Irked beyond belief. Because best will in the world, many, many moons ago, I ran for council, which wasn't one of my more sensible ideas. And it was for a very local reason. But it was at the time of Iraq, I think. And I remember going round the doors and there was some people who objected to the Iraq war. And I remember one guy on the doorstep said to me, he said, what do you think of this illegal war, blah, 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 you know, do you support this? And I was like, oh, hang on a minute. It doesn't matter whether I support it or not. What I do support is our guys out in the front line laying their life down in the line because someone told them to. Our soldiers, that's who I support. And I still support our soldiers, and therefore our soldiers should be getting supported with their wages, it should be getting supported with their equipment, because God forbid that something happens and we need to ask them to actually go and defend our country. Well, Boris Johnson's son is playing in his £150,000 playhouse, and they're going, oh, we can't possibly pay for the defence. Really? I mean, what part of Ukraine are they not getting? And they're actually saying they're going to cut the defence budget from what they said it was going to be. They're not going to make it as much. I mean, just, I have no words. So, yeah, that, obviously, as you can tell, that really irked me this evening. So, yeah. Prepping wise, again, I see no reason to stop prepping. I haven't actually done any because obviously I'm still a bit under the weather, and by the time I'm finished a day's work, it's just like, nah, making that bread nearly killed me. So I will be pulling out the bread, sitting down. Oh, that was the whole thing. The whole point of this, sorry, I got waylaid again, as I do. The whole point of this, bread, homemade bread. Now, I haven't had any dinner because I didn't want any dinner. There was nothing tickled my fancy, as you say, and it was just like bleh. But I want hot bread with butter, and I probably want my homemade jam on it as well because that's really good. What I noticed when I made bread during the pandemic, homemade bread is so much more filling than the sliced stuff that we get, which makes me wonder, what is the sliced stuff that we get? Because years ago, my mum used to read loads and loads of like Catherine Cookson and, you know, Tilly from the Mill or some rubbish like that. And I read. I mean, I will read 3 books in a day if I decide that I'm sitting down and reading. I read voraciously. And I remember there being, they had bread and dripping for dinner. They had bread and dripping for lunch at the Mill and stuff like that. And I'm like, how is that possible? How can they possibly? And then I made my own bread for the first time. And it is so much more filling than the sliced stuff we get. So I think that's a very positive thing to take into, you know, next year when things get a bit tougher. Homemade bread is definitely something you want to try. And that recipe from November, if you go back, is really, really good. And pretty easy to make. So yes, that was the whole thing I was going to tell you about the bread, apart from how jealous are you that I'm about to take a loaf out of the oven and go and have bread and butter and jam, and I'm so excited. So I shall go now and make myself a fresh cup of tea for when the loaf comes out the oven, and I will see you later. Bye.